Admiral Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the red alert sirens began screaming through Earth Defense Command. He set down his cup and ran toward the central command room, his boots echoing on the metal floors. Something big was happening, and Jake had a bad feeling about it. The command room was already full of people when Jake arrived. General Ryan Cole stood near the main screen, his face pale. Dr. Lisa Park was typing quickly on her computer, checking data that scrolled across multiple monitors. President Kate Williams had just walked in, still wearing her pajamas under a hastily thrown-on coat. "What do we have?" Jake asked. "Unknown transmission coming in from deep space," General Cole replied. "It's using technology we've never seen before. The signal is stronger than anything we can produce, and it's coming from outside our solar system." Dr. Park looked up from her computer. "The transmission is definitely artificial. Someone or something is trying to talk to us. The signal is so powerful that every radio telescope on Earth picked it up at the same time." President Williams moved closer to the main screen. "Can we understand it?" "That's the strange part," Dr. Park said. "The message is already translated into perfect English. Whatever sent this knows our language better than most humans do." Jake felt his stomach drop. First contact with aliens was something humanity had always dreamed about, but this didn't feel like a friendly hello. The timing and the power of the signal suggested something much more serious. "Play the message," President Williams ordered. The main screen flickered and then showed something that made everyone in the room take a step back. A tall figure appeared on the screen, but it wasn't human. The being looked like it was made of living crystal, with sharp edges and surfaces that reflected light in strange ways. Its voice was deep and cold, like winter wind through empty caves. "Greetings, primitive inhabitants of the third planet in System Sol 3, the being said. Its mouth didn't move like a human mouth, but the words were clear and perfect. "I am Ambassador Zethkara of the Galactic Council, speaking for the civilized species of this galaxy." Jake noticed that everyone in the room had stopped breathing. This was really happening. They were talking to aliens, and the aliens were calling them primitive. The crystal being continued speaking. "Your species has violated the natural order protocol by expanding beyond your home system without permission. In the past 50 Earth years, you have established colonies on 17 worlds and moons. This expansion is forbidden for species at your development level." Dr. Park was writing notes as fast as she could. Jake could see her hands shaking. None of them had expected aliens to already know so much about human activities in space. "The Galactic Council has observed your reckless use of faster-than-light travel," Ambassador Zethkara said. "Your primitive understanding of quantum mechanics makes your ships dangerous to other civilizations. You fly through space like children, playing with explosives." General Cole's face was getting red with anger, but he stayed quiet. Jake knew the general didn't like being lectured, especially by someone calling humans children. Furthermore, the alien ambassador continued, "Your species shows the typical aggression patterns of lower life forms. You have brought weapons to space and established military bases on multiple worlds. This behavior threatens the peace that the Galactic Council has maintained for over 2 million Earth years." President Williams stepped forward. "We didn't know there were rules," she said to the screen, even though this was obviously a recorded message. The crystal being's image seemed to look directly at her, which was impossible, but still made everyone uncomfortable. "Ignorance of galactic law is no excuse. Your species has had sufficient time to develop proper communication protocols. The fact that you have not contacted the Council shows your primitive nature." Jake was starting to understand that this wasn't going to be a friendly conversation. The aliens weren't here to welcome humanity to the galactic community. They were here to give orders. The Galactic Council hereby issues the following ultimatum to the human species, Ambassador Zethkara announced. You have 72 standard galactic hours to complete the following actions. First, all human colonies beyond your home system must be abandoned immediately. Second, all faster-than-light capable ships must be destroyed or surrendered to Council forces. Third, all weapons in space must be dismantled. The room was completely silent now. Jake could hear his own heartbeat. These aliens were demanding that humanity give up everything they had worked for in space. Fourth, the ambassador continued, your species will accept Council oversight of all technological development. No new space technology will be developed without Council approval. Fifth, Earth will pay tribute to the Council in the form of rare metals and biological specimens. Dr. Park made a small sound like she was going to be sick. Jake didn't blame her. The aliens were basically demanding that humanity become their slaves. Failure to comply with these demands will result in the complete sterilization of your home planet, Ambassador Zethkara said, and his crystal face showed no emotion at all. The Council has eliminated 47 species for similar violations of galactic law. You are not special. The message ended, leaving the command room in total silence. The main screen went back to showing Earth's orbital traffic as if nothing had happened, but everything had changed in the past few minutes. President Williams was the first to speak. How long do we have? General Cole checked his watch. If their hours are the same as ours, about 3 days. Jake walked over to Dr. Park, who was still staring at her computer screen. Lisa, what do you think? Are they serious? Dr. Park looked up at him with wide eyes. The energy signature of that transmission was incredible, Jake. They sent that message from at least 50 light-years away, and it arrived here with perfect clarity. Their technology is so far beyond ours that we might as well be throwing rocks at a nuclear submarine. So we surrender? General Cole asked. Or we fight and get wiped out, President Williams said quietly. Jake thought about the human colonies scattered across nearby star systems. Millions of people lived on those worlds now. They had built homes, started families, created new lives among the stars. The idea of abandoning all of that felt wrong. There might be another option, a voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Captain Alex Turner walking into the command room. Alex was one of Earth's best pilots, and he commanded the experimental stealth ship Nighthawk. He was also known for having crazy ideas that somehow worked. What kind of option? President Williams asked. Alex smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. The kind that might get us all killed, but at least we go down fighting. These Council aliens think they know everything about humans. Maybe it's time to show them how wrong they are. Jake looked around the room at the faces of Earth's leaders. In 3 days, humanity would either surrender everything they had worked for, or they would find a way to fight back against an enemy with technology beyond their understanding. The countdown had begun. Admiral Dan Crawford stood on the bridge of the USS Thunder, watching the tactical display as the consuming dark pulled back for the first time in its ancient existence. The entity had never retreated before, but something about human resistance was causing it to hesitate. Admiral, long-range sensors show the entity consolidating its forces, reported Science Officer Linda Hayes. It's preparing for what looks like a final assault. Crawford nodded grimly. The fleet had been fighting for 18 hours straight. Human ships were running on emergency power and improvised repairs. The alien vessels were in even worse condition, held together by human engineering and sheer determination. Dr. Rodriguez, what's your analysis of the entity's behavior change? Crawford asked. Dr. Alex Rodriguez looked up from his sensor readings. Admiral, the consuming dark feeds on fear and despair, but human psychological patterns are disrupting its feeding mechanism. Instead of weakening under stress, humans are getting angrier and more creative. Commander Patricia Hayes approached the command station with a data pad. Admiral, I've been working with the alien psionicists to map the entity's mental patterns. We think we've found something important. Explain, Crawford said. The entity has absorbed the knowledge and memories of 17 species, Patricia replied. But all those species shared similar peaceful mindsets. The Dark has never encountered a prey species that treats impossible odds as a personal challenge. Crawford studied the readings. You're saying it doesn't know how to process human stubbornness? More than that, Patricia continued, our anger and refusal to surrender is creating a feedback loop. The entity is starting to experience something new. Doubt. Captain Jake Morrison's voice came over the communication system from the Phoenix. Admiral, we're reading massive energy buildups throughout the Dark. It's preparing something big. Crawford looked at the tactical display showing their defensive positions. The human fleet formed a protective wall around the refugee ships, while alien vessels provided support with their remaining functional systems. It was a desperate formation that shouldn't work, but human military doctrine had always been about making impossible situations work somehow. All ships, this is Admiral Crawford, he announced to the fleet. The entity is preparing its final attack. This is where we find out if being survivors of a death world is enough to save the galaxy. The consuming dark gathered itself into a massive wave of entropy that began rolling toward the fleet. As it approached, space itself seemed to crack and bleed energy into the void. The system's dying star flickered like a candle in a hurricane. But Crawford had one last strategy, something no other species had ever tried against the entity. All ships activate external speakers and broadcast on all frequencies. Across the fleet, human voices began speaking into the darkness. They weren't pleas for mercy or formal military communications. They were the voices of humans doing what humans did best when faced with certain death. This is Captain Ben Parker aboard the Ranger. Hey there, Shadow Thing. You picked the wrong species to mess with today. Marine Sergeant Eddie Brooks here. We've been fighting things trying to kill us since we climbed down from the trees. You're just another Tuesday for us. Chief Engineer Maya Johnson calling. We've survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, and volcanic winters. What makes you think a little darkness is going to stop us now? The messages weren't coordinated or official. They were individual humans expressing the collective attitude of their species toward extinction events. Dark humor, stubborn defiance, and absolute refusal to accept defeat filled the communication channels. The consuming. Dark hesitated. For millions of years, it had heard only screams of terror and pleas for mercy from its victims. The concept of prey that mocked their own impending doom was completely outside its experience. Dr. Susan Blake was monitoring the entity's energy patterns when she noticed something unprecedented. Admiral, the Dark's feeding efficiency is dropping dramatically. Human psychological warfare is actually working. Ambassador Veltar watched from the Phoenix Bridge as human crews continued their defiant broadcast while preparing for the final battle. Captain Morrison, Your species is doing something that violates every natural law I know. You are making your own extinction into a source of strength." Jake smiled grimly while coordinating the fleet's weapons. "On Earth, we learned that if you're going to die anyway, you might as well go down fighting. And if you're lucky, maybe you'll hurt the thing that's trying to kill you." The final assault began as the consuming dark crashed into the human defensive line. Ships exploded and died, but the survivors kept fighting with whatever they had left. Human vessels used ramming attacks when their weapons failed. Crews jury-rigged explosives from life support systems when ammunition ran out. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Tucker led her Marines in a desperate boarding action against shadow entities that had infected the command ship. Fighting in zero gravity with improvised weapons, her squad carved through creatures that had destroyed entire star systems. "Tucker to all units," she called over the radio while firing a chemical flare at a shadow entity. "Remember, we're the descendants of the people who looked at a world covered in ice and said, 'We can make this work.' These things are just another environmental hazard." Captain Eddie Brooks of the assault carrier USS Storm made the decisive move when he realized the entity was concentrating its forces for a final feeding attempt. "Admiral Crawford, requesting permission to take my ship into the enemy's core." "Brooks, that's a suicide mission," Crawford replied. "Sir, my ship is already dead. Life support failed 20 minutes ago, but we've got a cargo bay full of nuclear warheads that the peaceful worlds thought were too primitive to use." Crawford understood immediately. "Permission granted, Captain. Give them hell." The USS Storm, its hull cracked and bleeding atmosphere, dove directly into the heart of the consuming dark. As shadow entities swarmed the ship, Brooks and his crew manually detonated every nuclear weapon they carried. The explosion tore through. The entity's concentrated form like a wound in reality itself. The dark screamed across dimensional barriers as nuclear fire, the most crude and violent force humans had ever harnessed, burned through its essence. For the first time in its existence, the consuming dark felt pain. Real damage that it couldn't immediately heal by consuming more life force. The concept was so alien to its nature that it began to retreat, pulling its scattered essence away from the nuclear flames. "All ships, the entity is withdrawing," reported Science Officer Hayes. "Energy readings are dropping across all sectors." But the battle wasn't over. The consuming dark, wounded and confused, began a strategic retreat toward the edge of the system. It had learned something important about humans, something that would change its feeding patterns forever. Crawford opened a final communication to the entity, not knowing if it could understand, but needing to say the words anyway. "This is Admiral Dan Crawford of the human fleet. You came here expecting to find easy prey. Instead, you found the children of Earth, the death world that forged us in fire and ice and disaster. Remember this day, because if you ever threaten our friends again, we'll be waiting." The consuming dark disappeared into the void between galaxies, carrying with it the knowledge that somewhere in the universe existed a species that got stronger when threatened with extinction. In the aftermath, as rescue ships arrived from human space and the refugee fleet began repairs, Ambassador Veltar made an observation that would become legend throughout the galaxy. "We sought asylum among the survivors of the deadliest world," he said to the assembled representatives of 7 species. "We discovered that death itself had taught them the most valuable lesson in the universe. When faced with impossible odds, the correct response is not despair, but defiance." The refugee species chose to remain in human space, forming the Death World Alliance. They established colonies on harsh worlds that other species avoided, learning human adaptability and resilience. Under human guidance, they began to thrive in environments that would have been uninhabitable to their ancestors. Years later, when new threats emerged from the depths of space, they would find not a galaxy of peaceful, vulnerable civilizations, but a network of hardy survivors trained by the children of the deadliest world ever discovered. The consuming dark had taught the galaxy an important lesson. Sometimes the best defense against cosmic horrors was not advanced technology or superior firepower, but the simple human refusal to quit when quitting made sense. And in the deepest reaches of space, other ancient entities took note and decided that perhaps this particular galaxy was not worth the trouble after all. The main body of the consuming dark arrived like a wave of death washing across the star system. It wasn't a ship or fleet, but something far worse. Space itself seemed to bend and twist as reality warped around the entity. The system's star began to dim as something drained its nuclear fire. Fleet Admiral Dan Crawford had taken command of the combined human and alien forces from the battleship USS Thunder. He watched the sensor readings with growing alarm as planets started losing their magnetic fields and atmospheres began bleeding into space. "Admiral, we're reading massive gravitational distortions throughout the system," reported Science Officer Linda Hayes. "The entity is somehow draining energy directly from matter itself." Crawford studied the tactical display showing their defensive formation. 300 alien refugee ships protected by 50 human vessels, all that stood between the consuming dark and the complete destruction of another star system. "All ships. This is Admiral Crawford," he announced over the fleet communication system. "What we face today has destroyed 17 civilizations, but those civilizations never had humans fighting alongside them. Today we show this thing what happens when it messes with survivors of the deadliest world in the galaxy." The consuming dark rolled toward them like a storm front made of living shadow. As it approached, space stations throughout the system went dark and began drifting dead in space. Emergency broadcasts from outer colonies cut off one by one as the wave of entropy consumed everything in its path. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Tucker was aboard Mining Station Beta 7 when the shadow reached them. The station lost main power instantly, but emergency systems kept life support running. Through the observation windows, she could see shadow entities phasing through the station's hull. "All units, this is Tucker," she said over her suit radio. "We're fighting in zero gravity with magnetic boots and kinetic weapons only. Treat this like urban warfare in the worst neighborhoods back on Earth." Her Marine squad moved through the station's corridors, using magnetic anchors and maneuvering jets to navigate in 3 dimensions. The shadow entities flowed through walls and floors, but they couldn't phase through fast-moving projectiles. "Contact front," called Marine Pete Wilson as shadows emerged from the floor ahead. Firing chemical rounds, the corridor filled with explosions as the Marines fired everything they had. Chemical grenades, electromagnetic pulse devices, and armor-piercing rounds tore through the entities. What would have been impossible in normal gravity became manageable when you could fire in any direction. "Tucker to all stations," Amy reported. "Fighting in zero-G gives us an advantage. The shadows move like they expect gravity. Use that against them." Aboard the Phoenix, Captain Jake Morrison was coordinating the fleet's mobile defense. Human. Ships were designed to operate in the harsh radiation environment around Earth's shipyards, which made them surprisingly durable against the reality-warping attacks of the consuming dark. "All human vessels, activate emergency shielding," Jake ordered. "Redirect all power from non-essential systems to armor and weapons." The alien ships tried to follow the same strategy, but their elegant energy-based systems couldn't handle the brutal overloading that human ships used routinely. Crystal hulls cracked under the strain while human vessels, built like armored bunkers, continued fighting. Dr. Susan Blake was in the Phoenix Medical Bay treating wounded from the first wave, attacks when she made a crucial discovery. She was examining human survivors who had been exposed to the entity's life-draining effect. "Admiral Crawford, this is Dr. Blake," she said over the communication link. "I found something important. Humans exposed to the Dark's energy drain show much slower degradation than aliens." "Explain, Doctor," Crawford replied while coordinating the fleet's movements. "Human DNA carries genetic markers from surviving radiation exposure, toxic environments, and extreme stress. Our ancestors lived through ice ages, volcanic winters, and asteroid impacts. We're literally built to survive apocalyptic events, Commander." Lisa Bennett was working with alien scientists to understand the entity's attack patterns. "The consuming dark feeds on fear and despair," she reported. "It drains life force more effectively from beings that have given up hope." "And humans?" Admiral Crawford asked. "Humans seem to get more determined as conditions get worse," Lisa replied. "Our stress response is fight instead of flight. The entity can't feed properly on anger and stubbornness." The battle moved deeper into the system as the consuming dark pressed its attack. Human ships used tactics learned from fighting in asteroid fields and solar radiation storms. They stayed close to planets and space debris, using the environment as both cover and weapon. Captain Ben Parker led his destroyer squadron in a desperate attack run through the outer edge of the dark. "All ships, remember your training from the Titan defense grid," he called over the radio. "Fast, unpredictable movements. Use everything around you." The human ships dove between asteroids and disabled space stations, firing kinetic weapons in all directions. The shadow entities tried to follow but couldn't adapt to the chaotic three-dimensional combat that humans had learned fighting in Earth's orbital zones. Chief Engineer Maya Johnson had converted the Phoenix's cargo bays into weapons factories. Alien refugees worked alongside human technicians to build ammunition and improvised explosives. "Production rate is at maximum," Maya reported to Admiral Crawford. "But we're using supplies faster than we can make them. How long can we sustain this level of combat?" Crawford asked. "Maybe 6 hours at current consumption," Maya replied. "After that, we're down to whatever we can improvise from spare parts." Lieutenant Commander Ryan Foster was coordinating repairs across the fleet when he noticed something strange. "Admiral, the alien ships that have taken the most damage are actually performing better in combat." "Explain," Crawford said while watching another wave of shadow entities approach. "When their elegant systems get damaged, they start working more like our crude technology," Ryan replied. "Broken harmonic resonators act like electromagnetic pulse generators. Cracked crystal hulls create kinetic weapon fragments." Dr. Alex Rodriguez was analyzing the entity's behavior patterns from the Phoenix Science Lab. "Admiral, I think the consuming dark is having trouble understanding us. It's adapted to fight 17 different species, but human behavior doesn't match any known patterns." "What do you mean?" Crawford asked. "Every other species it faced either fought with honor and lost, or surrendered when resistance seemed hopeless. Humans keep fighting dirty and refuse to give up even when mathematically we should lose." The entity seemed to realize this as well. The shadow attacks became more focused, targeting human ships specifically. But human vessels, designed to survive in the most hostile environment known to galactic civilization, proved remarkably difficult to destroy. Marine Sergeant Eddie Brooks was leading a boarding action against a shadow-infected space station when his squad discovered something unexpected. "Admiral, The shadows can't phase through matter that's moving fast enough. If we keep the station spinning, they can't get solid footing. Across the fleet, human crews began using rotation and acceleration as weapons. Ships that should have been dead in space used maneuvering thrusters to create artificial gravity that disrupted shadow entity movements. The battle became a grueling test of endurance. Human ships, built to withstand years of operation in radiation-soaked space around a death world, kept fighting long after more advanced vessels would have failed. The aliens watched in amazement as humans treated catastrophic damage as just another engineering problem to solve. Ambassador Veltar was on the Phoenix Bridge when the critical moment came. The consuming dark had pressed its attack to the point where conventional resistance should have collapsed. But instead of giving up, the human fleet seemed to get more creative and dangerous. "Captain Morrison," Veltar said quietly, "your species is doing something that no other civilization has ever attempted." "What's that?" Jake asked, while coordinating another desperate counterattack. "You're making the consuming dark afraid," Veltar replied. "For the first time in millions of years, it has encountered prey that becomes more dangerous when cornered. The entity's attacks began to show something that might have been hesitation. It had consumed galaxies of peaceful civilizations, but it had never faced survivors of a world that had spent millions of years trying to kill everything on it." Admiral Crawford saw the change in the enemy's behavior and realized this was their chance. "All ships, prepare for final assault. We're going to show this thing what humans do when someone threatens our friends." The first scout entities of the consuming dark arrived without warning. They appeared as writhing masses of shadow that seemed to absorb light itself. The things moved through space like living darkness, phasing through solid matter as if it didn't exist. Captain Ben Parker of the destroyer USS Ranger was on patrol when his sensors detected them. "Control, this is Ranger. I've got multiple bogies approaching the fleet. They don't match any known signatures." Admiral Carter's voice crackled over the communication system. "Ranger, maintain distance and observe. Do not engage until we understand what we're dealing with." But the shadow entities had no intention of waiting. They moved directly toward the Zephyrian vessels at the edge of the refugee formation. As they touched the alien ships, the hulls began to corrode and the lights inside started to dim. "Admiral, the Zephyrian ship Windsinger is under attack," reported Communications Officer Tony Martinez from the Phoenix. "Their hull is dissolving and life support is failing. All ships, engage the hostiles," Admiral Carter ordered. "Protect the refugees." The human fleet opened fire with energy weapons, plasma cannons, and laser batteries. The beams passed through the shadow entities without effect. The creatures continued their attack, draining power from the alien ships and leaving empty hulls floating in space. "Weapons are ineffective," Captain Parker reported. "Energy attacks pass right through them." Chief Engineer Maya Johnson was watching the battle from the Phoenix's engineering deck when she noticed something strange. "Captain Morrison, the shadows seem to avoid our nuclear reactor core. They're steering around the engineering section." Jake studied the tactical display. "Maya, what's different about our reactor compared to the alien power systems?" "Ours uses controlled nuclear fusion with heavy electromagnetic containment," Maya replied. "The alien ships use crystalline energy matrices that resonate with harmonic frequencies. So they avoid crude technology but absorb refined energy," Jake said. "Maya, what if we tried kinetic weapons instead of energy weapons?" Maya's eyes lit up with understanding. "Rail guns, chemical explosives, good old-fashioned bullets. If they phase through matter, they might not be able to phase through fast-moving matter. Admiral Carter, this is Morrison, Jake said over the communication link. Request permission to test kinetic weapons against the hostiles. Permission granted, Captain. We're losing ships fast. The Phoenix turned toward the nearest shadow entity and fired its main railgun. The tungsten slug accelerated. To a significant fraction of light speed, struck the creature dead center. The shadow writhed and let out a sound like tearing fabric before dissolving into nothing. Direct hit and target destroyed, Jake reported. Kinetic weapons are effective. Across the fleet, human ships switched to their backup kinetic weapon systems. Chemical missiles, railgun slugs, and even old-style projectile weapons proved deadly against the shadow entities. The alien crews watched in amazement as human technology they considered primitive succeeded where their advanced systems failed. Elder Kethamari contacted Admiral Carter directly. Admiral, your weapons work against them. How is this possible? Because we build things to work when everything else fails, Admiral Carter replied. Maya, start fabricating more kinetic ammunition. All ships conserve energy weapons and switch to projectiles. Dr. Alex Rodriguez was studying the destroyed shadow entities when he made a disturbing discovery. Admiral, these aren't the main threat. They're scouts testing our defenses. The real consuming dark is still approaching. Captain Ben Parker had taken command of a mixed squadron of human and alien ships. The aliens were struggling to adapt to human military tactics, which seemed chaotic compared to their organized battle formations. Zephyrian vessel Crystal Wind, you're flying too straight, Parker said over the communication link. In human combat, we never fly predictable patterns. But Captain Parker, our formation maintains maximum efficiency, replied the Zephyrian. Pilot, efficiency will get you killed against these things, Parker said. Watch and learn. Parker's destroyer suddenly broke formation and dove toward an approaching shadow entity at an impossible angle. The creature tried to follow but couldn't match the erratic movement. Parker fired a spread of chemical missiles that detonated around the entity, tearing it apart. Chaos beats efficiency when your enemy expects logic, Parker explained to the alien pilots. On Earth, we learned to fight dirty because clean fighting gets you eaten by predators. Ambassador Veltar was observing from the Phoenix Bridge. Captain Morrison, your military tactics are unlike anything in our databases. You seem to deliberately break your own rules. That's because rules are for normal situations, Jake replied. When you're fighting for survival, the only rule is to win. Earth taught us that lesson millions of times. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Foster had been working with alien engineers to modify their weapons. The problem is that your ships are designed for peaceful exploration, he told a group of crystalline collective engineers. Every system is optimized for harmony and efficiency. How would you modify them? Asked engineer Shelvar. I'd strip out half the safety systems and add redundant backups, Ryan said. I'd replace your energy weapons with projectile launchers. I'd install armor instead of shields, because armor works even when the power fails. The alien engineers looked horrified. But that would make the ships crude and inefficient. It would make them survivable, Ryan corrected. Pretty ships are nice, but ugly ships that still fight after taking damage are better. Maya Johnson was in the main hangar working with refugee technicians to build improvised weapons. She had discovered that the aliens possessed incredible manufacturing capabilities, but had never considered using them for warfare. We can create these projectile weapons you describe, said Chief Technician Mordan of the Peaceful Worlds. But they seem so primitive compared to our harmonic resonance systems. Primitive doesn't mean useless, Maya explained while assembling a chemical explosive. Sometimes the simple solution is the best solution. Your harmonic weapons are beautiful, but these chemical bombs will blow holes in things regardless of how advanced they are. The alien technicians watched in fascination as Maya showed them how to create electromagnetic pulse devices using basic human electronics. The devices were crude by alien standards, but devastatingly effective against the shadow entities. Captain Threx of the warrior clans was learning human ground combat techniques from Marine Sergeant Eddie Brooks. The sergeant was teaching alien warriors how to fight in three-dimensional space with limited visibility. "Your species fights with honor and courage," Sergeant Brooks said to a group of alien soldiers. "But honor doesn't work against enemies that don't follow the rules. These shadow things don't fight fair, so neither should we." "What do you suggest?" Captain Threx asked. "Ambush tactics, hit-and-run attacks, using the environment as a weapon," Brooks replied. "On Earth, the most dangerous predators weren't the biggest or strongest. They were the smartest and most adaptable. As the mixed fleet worked together, patterns began to emerge. Human military doctrine, born from countless wars on a hostile world, proved remarkably effective when combined with alien technology and knowledge. The refugees started to understand that survival wasn't about having the best equipment, but about using whatever you had in unexpected ways. Dr. Rodriguez made another discovery while studying human DNA samples. "Admiral, I've found something interesting. Humans carry genetic markers that suggest our ancestors survived at least 3 extinction-level events on Earth." "What kind of events?" Admiral Carter asked. "Asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, ice ages, events that wiped out most other life forms. But humans survived by adapting, moving, and changing their behavior." Admiral Carter nodded grimly. "So we're already the survivors of multiple apocalypses." "Yes, and each survival event made us more resilient. We're not just fighting one extinction. We're fighting as the descendants of everyone who refused to give up when the world ended." The refugee fleet had become something new, a mixture of human determination and alien knowledge. As they prepared for the main assault, Ambassador Veltar made an observation that would be remembered long after the battle was over. "We came seeking asylum among the survivors of the deadliest world," he said. "But we have discovered that death itself taught them the most important lesson of all. When faced with impossible odds, the proper response is not acceptance, but anger." Long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures approaching. The main body of the consuming dark was almost upon them. Admiral Helen Carter arrived aboard the heavy cruiser USS Valiant 12 hours after Captain Morrison's first report. The refugee situation had grown far beyond what anyone expected. Through the viewing ports of the Phoenix, Jake could see dozens of alien ships floating in formation around the human fleet. More arrived every few hours. "Captain Morrison, report," Admiral Carter said as she stepped onto the Phoenix's bridge. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen many battles. "Ma'am, we now have over 300 alien vessels seeking asylum," Jake replied. 7 different species all telling the same story. Something called the consuming dark has destroyed their homeworlds completely. Admiral Carter studied the tactical display showing the mixed fleet. "And they all came to human space specifically?" "Yes, Admiral. They believe humans are the only species that might survive contact with this entity. Our reputation as Death World survivors seems to be well known throughout the galaxy." Commander Lisa Bennett approached with a data pad. "Admiral, I've been working with the alien scholars to understand what we're facing. The information is disturbing. Admiral Carter took the pad and read through the reports. Her expression grew more serious with each line. Class 12 entities? Galactic-level extinction events? This sounds like science fiction. Unfortunately, it's very real, came a new voice. Ambassador Veltar had recovered enough to walk, though. He still moved slowly. Behind him came representatives from the other refugee species. Jake recognized Elder Kethmari from the Crystalline Collective, her body made of living crystal that normally glowed with inner light. Now she was dim and cracked. Beside her stood Captain Threx of the warrior clans, a large reptilian being whose scales had lost their usual bright patterns. "Admiral Carter," Veltar said with a formal bow, "we are grateful for human protection. We have brought our surviving knowledge to share with you, hoping it might help in the battle to come." Dr. Alex Rodriguez joined the group, carrying his own datapad filled with research. "Admiral, what they've told us changes everything we thought we knew about cosmic threats. The consuming dark isn't just a weapon or an army, it's a force of nature." Admiral Carter gestured for everyone to move to the main conference room. Once seated around the large table, she looked at each alien representative. "Tell me everything. Start from the beginning." Elder Kethmari spoke first, her voice like wind through crystal caves. "The dark appears approximately every 4 million years. Ancient records speak of it across many galaxies. It emerges from the void between galaxies and moves systematically through inhabited space." "How does it choose targets?" Admiral Carter asked. Captain Threx answered, his deep voice rumbling. "It seeks worlds with complex life systems and advanced civilizations. Garden worlds with perfect climates and peaceful societies are its preferred feeding grounds." Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward. "That's the key point, Admiral. All the destroyed species came from paradise worlds. Perfect weather, no natural disasters, completely stable environments. Their civilizations developed without ever facing serious threats." "And Earth?" Admiral Carter asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Earth is classified as unsuitable for consumption," Veltar explained. "Your world's constant disasters, extreme weather, tectonic activity, and radiation exposure make it a poor feeding source. The dark prefers life that has never known struggle." Lisa Bennett pulled up a holographic display showing brain scans. "We've been studying the neurological differences between human and alien refugees. The differences are remarkable." The display showed 2 brain patterns side by side. The alien pattern was smooth and organized, while the human pattern showed chaotic but dense activity in several regions. "The alien brain patterns show harmony and balance," Lisa continued. "Beautiful, but vulnerable to psychic disruption. Human brains show what we call survival scarring. Neural pathways developed through constant stress and problem-solving." Admiral Carter studied the display. "You're saying our harsh environment literally rewired our brains?" "Exactly," Dr. Rodriguez said. "Humans have evolved psychological defenses that other species lack. When faced with impossible situations, most species experience despair and give up. Humans get angry and start looking for ways to fight back." Elder Kethmari's crystal body flickered with weak light. "We have observed this difference. When our worlds were being consumed, our people felt overwhelming sadness and accepted their fate. From what we have learned of human history, your species would have started throwing rocks at the entity." Captain Threx nodded agreement. "Our warriors are trained for battle, but we have never faced anything that could not be defeated through strength or honor. When conventional weapons failed against the dark, we had no other options. Humans seem to have many options." Admiral Carter turned to Lieutenant Commander Ryan Foster, who had been quietly taking notes. "Foster, you've been studying their technical data. What's your assessment?" Ryan stood and activated another display. "Admiral, the alien technologies are incredibly advanced, but they're all based on energy manipulation and harmonic resonance. Beautiful, efficient, but completely useless against an entity that feeds on energy. What about our technology?" Admiral Carter asked. "Our tech is crude by comparison, but it's designed for hostile environments. Kinetic weapons, chemical explosives, electromagnetic systems that can function in extreme conditions. We build things to survive when everything goes wrong." Veltar looked puzzled. "Captain Morrison mentioned that humans often succeed where others fail, not through superior technology, but through what you call thinking outside the box. We do not understand this concept." Jake smiled grimly. "It means we don't follow rules. When the rules don't work, if the front door is locked, we'll climb through a window, dig under the wall, or blow a hole in the roof. Your species treats impossible situations as puzzles to solve," Elder Kethmari observed. "We treat them as fate to accept." Dr. Rodriguez activated another display showing genetic markers. "There's more. We've analyzed DNA samples from volunteers among the refugees and compared them to human samples. Humans carry genetic adaptations from surviving ice ages, volcanic eruptions, radiation exposure, and countless other disasters." "What kind of adaptations?" Admiral Carter asked. "Enhanced healing factors, resistance to radiation and toxins, ability to function under extreme stress, and most importantly, mental resilience. Humans are literally built to survive things that would kill other species." Captain Threx leaned back in his chair. "No wonder the galaxy fears and respects humans. You are weapons forged by your own world." Admiral Carter stood and looked out at the refugee fleet through the conference room's viewing port. "How long before this consuming dark reaches our position?" Veltar consulted a device on his wrist. "Our calculations suggest 3 to 4 days. Admiral, it follows the trail of escaping ships, feeding on the fear and despair they leave behind. Then we have 3 days to turn a refugee fleet into a fighting force," Admiral Carter said. "Commander Bennett, I want you working with their scientists on defensive strategies. Dr. Rodriguez, continue studying the biological differences. Foster, start modifying our weapons based on what we've learned." Jake stood as well. "Admiral, what about the refugees who can't fight?" "They'll have to learn," Admiral Carter replied firmly, "or we'll all die together. The one advantage we have is that humans have been preparing for impossible situations our entire evolutionary history. Now we get to find out if that's enough." The meeting broke up. Veltar approached Admiral Carter privately. "Admiral, there is something else. The dark does not just consume life. It learns from what it destroys. It will have absorbed the knowledge and abilities of 17 species. It knows how they think, how they fight, how they fail." Admiral Carter nodded grimly. "But it's never consumed humans before." "No," Veltar agreed. "You will be as unknown to it as it is to you. Perhaps that will be enough." Outside the conference room, alert signals began sounding throughout the fleet. Long-range sensors had detected the first energy signatures of the approaching threat.